Welcome to Sundance 2025, everyone. So this is just such an important documentary about the wave of book banning across the US and what it says about free speech and how freedom is under attack. It's a harrowing thing to watch, but so important. And we're here with a couple of the librarians, Suzette Baker and Carolyn Foote, as well as the director, Kim Snyder, producer, Allison Benson, and executive producer, Sarah Jessica Parker. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my gosh, how did this project originate?
Well, it started with Carolyn, actually, over 3 years ago, when this Krauss list came out in Texas. We started in Texas, and we focused on Carolyn and three of her colleagues who were standing up against this unprecedented book banning, this list of 850 books that had come out to tell school libraries to look at their shelves for books that were basically targeting race and gender.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just an extraordinarily harrowing experience that both of you have had. You know, people coming after you, demonizing you, acting like that you're, doing all these things that you totally had not done, and reading things into, saying that, the books in your libraries are like pornography. They are definitely not in any possible way. How were you worried at all about participating in the film for fear of publicizing, perhaps incurring even more attacks against you, both of you?
I'm more worried now than I was in participating in the film. When we started early on, we didn't know this fight would get so widespread, that there would be state legislation, that this fight would become so big. And so now that it is, it feels like it's going to be a powerful moment for the film to come out. But of course, I feel a little nervous about the increased exposure.
I mean, so much of the film is seeing both of you, speaking at school board meetings and articulating your case and, really trying to advocate for freedom. And it's just, as this has gone on, how, what have you taken away in terms of just how organized this pushback is that you've received? It's like there's big money going into these efforts to ban books.
There is. It's very organized. I mean, I've watched them actually in Commissioner Court's meetings, reading scripts that they download off the internet, as far as banning books, what you need to say, how you need to say it, how you need to fill the film forms out. It's a organized movement to ban books.
It's an extraordinary thing because, I'm a Floridian and I know we have had, I'm very aware of these issues. And, I think that there was a perception at first that there are just a few people really driving this. And, now what your film illuminates, I think so powerfully, is that there's big money going into this. There's major political actors behind this. There's a billionaire in Texas who's funding a lot of this. Just in terms of Kim, the investigative side of this, just uncovering, how, massive this whole thing is. What was that process like?
It was like pulling a thread that just kept coming out. I don't think I intended it to be as investigative expose as it ended up being. It started with, at the same time that they were sort of in shock and awe from this happening in Texas, and then it spread. And we started to see it happening all over. And Martha, who's with us as well, at a certain point says that she realized it wasn't organic, it was organized, and connects the dots. And then we started to dig deeper and really understand the connections about what a lot of us hear about, which is you can't talk about this without talking about taking over school boards. You can't talk about it without parental rights and Moms for Liberty and white Christian nationalism. So it does become this kind of hierarchical, very organized effort.
I used to say we were the canary in the coal mine. We were trying to shout out because we knew that it could spread to higher ed and to public libraries and to other spaces.
But what I love is that even though the film starts by focusing quite a bit on Texas and a bit on Florida, it shows that I think what Floridians and Texans often know is that things that start there often spread to the rest of the country. And so we see now challenges in terms of book banning in New Jersey and New York in the film as well.
New Orleans,
Yeah,
Louisiana.
Louisiana.
And Louisiana. I mean, how important was it to just like not just target these two states, but to show, no, this could be a nationwide problem very
We
soon?
were like, when do you stop shooting?
Yeah.
Because you could just go on and on and on. I
I
mean,
think by the time we met Kim, it was clear to you and to those of us who had been, in our opinion, very happily asked to join, that it was something that should be looked at in a far more broad way. And even just for the simple reasons of opening a movie up, I think it sort of did the work for you in some ways, in terms of like looking across the country and seeing where these hot spots were that did speak to larger issues inside the state. That, as you've said, it's the tip of the iceberg, but it's an incredibly acute and dangerous tip as well.
And it's also, I think, a playbook for not only this issue. We see it with immigration. We see it with women's rights. It's this thing that becomes something that sticks, and then it becomes replicated. And they say, well, that works, and then it becomes something that happens. It's happening.
One of the things I think that's so important that gets lost in the politics of it is the sensitivity, the necessity, the importance, the gateway that is a book, and the way we talk about books and the relationships that they cultivate among people, between understandings. Books have been, for a large majority of us, for hundreds of years, an important companion, but also the bridge to understanding, to information, to compassion, to broadening a child's opportunities in the world. And the politics have this very public-facing fight or effort on the opposition side has very cleverly lost the reason that these people, these extraordinary librarians, are fighting, which is for a person and a book, and what it means and what we know it means in every study in the world, and the ways in which we can talk about safety in children and what can be appropriate and not appropriate, and the ways in which parents and church leaders and mosque leaders and everybody can play a part without taking something away from a child that might be a life changer.
Isn't it fascinating that, even with, certainly there's been legislation and, to try to protect kids in terms of the internet and social media and all, but, how fascinating that the oldest medium of all, books, are still so uniquely powerful in this sense and scrutinized in a way that I don't even know if they're scrutinizing the internet and social media. Why do you think books are kind of ground zero of all of this?
I just think it shows how powerful they are. And in doing so, they're sort of like canceling out their own argument in a way. But there's a long history of people being very afraid of books.
Right.
And I do think you bring up such an interesting point about the internet somehow being benign and the printed word on paper being so threatening. And I think you guys can just be far more articulate than I was, sorry.
So many of these books that are being challenged are children's or young adults books, and the authors, of course, know who they're writing for. And so I try to remind parents that when a teenager's reading a young adult book about a serious issue, the author knows, and there are friendly characters in the book who help that character, and there's a good resolution at the end of the book, usually, because they're written for that age group. And if that same teenager went on the internet and looked up that topic, there wouldn't be those friendly guides along the side helping them, and those characters who come in as helpers. And so I think it's important not to lose that human aspect of books that is so meaningful to their inner dialogue that we don't even know they're having.
Allison and Sarah Jessica, how did you get involved with this project?
We'll just keep hugging down the line. Kim brought it to us and was working on it, and it was one of those projects that as we already talked about, it started out in one way, and we thought, okay, this is what the doc is going to focus on, and then it just kept changing and opening up, and there was more that Kim was finding, and it was, state by state, librarian by librarian, issue by issue. So we were very fortunate to come in early on and be a part of this. So
I also think it just spoke to Allison immediately.
Yeah.
It was so obvious that if there was a way in which we could be helpful, valuable, that it was something that we would have, had we known from the beginning, wanted to be a part of because of the subject matter. And Allison is, fierce, and she'll just get what she needs to get in order to get something done. So we were really happy to be asked.
And for our side, it was so important that your commitment and your passion early on for so many years to books and to libraries was so organic that it just felt like a perfect, I was going to say pretty matches.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think it's just so meaningful, Allison and Sarah Jessica, that you got involved, because there is some discussion right now about there being kind of a chilling effect in Hollywood after the election, people not wanting to be as vocally political or get into these fights quite as much. I don't know how much of that is true, but that is a perception that's been discussed. What do you think about that? Do you think that there has been that chilling effect, or do you feel like we'll still see a
I think we both might have slightly different perspectives on it because we're looking at it differently. I have not paid a great deal of attention to any chatter, peripheral or not, about whether Hollywood is quiet or not. But for us, vis-a-vis this movie specifically, this documentary, there's nothing controversial to me about supporting our libraries, our librarians in our public schools and in our public spaces. And I've been that way for my entire life. I was raised in a library. I'm one of 8 kids. If I didn't have a library, I don't know who I would be today. And that was because there was a librarian every place I went, no matter where I moved to, that pointed me in a direction. And I had parents who cared a huge amount about how to make my life more rich and still be appropriate. And so whatever Hollywood is doing and how they are feeling is inconsequential, specific to these people, these books, the idea of the access to freedom and information. So it doesn't really go hand in hand with the consequences of this particular election, more so what will it be moving forward in terms of policy on the state level in particular, but also when it gets smaller, local and city level decisions and policy. I don't know, Allison.
Go ahead. No. I was going to say for us, well, the genesis of your question about the books, for us, it was just really important that we focus on the plight of the librarians themselves, as someone says, the stewards of the resources, of the books. And to that end, the idea that they were are under attack, how important it was to think about what role they play as a firewall and what the implications of this are. So I think that's where it sort of, starts to marry up.
It sort of eclipses all other conversation in a way. Like the world goes on and there's conflict and people disagree, etc. But the nature of their efforts, sorry, my hands is in your face. It's quite serious, actually. It's actually serious and really scary, and it is a movement that I think will prove to be as important as any movement in the history of our country, simply because it's about access to something that is necessary for us. And I think that's why it's so scary to so many people, and why what they are doing is so extraordinary.
I think we're so interested also at IndieWire always just in the art of collaboration and how you go about telling a story like this, because it's such a big issue. And, obviously Suzette and Carolyn, never been in a movie before. I've never been in a documentary before. And then we have extraordinary experience with filmmaking represented here as well. So, how did you go about, Kim, Allison, Sarah Jessica, collaborating to tell the story with all these different experience levels that you have here?
I generally make documentaries that see the people in my film as collaborators rather than subjects. And that was definitely the case here. These are also information specialists, so you rely on them to inform, and they were there every step of the way. So that aspect, and then it was sort of Wizard of Oz, where we'd pick up another one and another one, and so that part of the collaboration was just, I just have to say, it's just so humbling and honoring I truly see these people as heroes right now in our society. So
And being IndieWire, this was a lot of fundraising. Like there was a lot of independent, I'm looking at producers that are over here. I mean, this was a collaboration the whole way. So to make this film, to find the financing, all of the fundraisers, we would have constant conversations of, we're going to do this event, and we're trying to bring people in. So, and it was a group of amazing women. Do I dare say?
It was.
Yes. So we are communicators. So everyone was in constant conversation.
And everybody on the side, I see Jana over there,
Yep.
come out of the world of Allison, Jana, of documentary, filmmaking. So they understand the muscle it takes, the perseverance it takes. And I think sometimes, I can't speak for Jana, but for Allison, sometimes the subject matter just tells you what to do every day. And you just scratch and claw and be creative and try to find dollars where you can when you think it's simply so necessary.
And let's be real, these types of documentaries right now are becoming harder than ever because of the environment with streamers and politics and all kinds of other things that are real. So it takes real, it takes a lot of digging and a lot of faith in people to work with who can make these things come to fruition right now.
And as a subject or a collaborator, I want to give thanks and credit to Kim and her whole team, because really we were all starting to connect with each other across the country, and they were following that and open to listening and treated our stories with respect, because it was very vulnerable for many of us, and we so much appreciated that.
Well, thank you so much for bringing this movie to the festival. I know people are going to be talking about it and upset by it and inspired by it too, in terms of all that you've done to stand up for freedom, and it's a remarkable thing. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Such a smart interview.
I know, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you
Really
very much for
appreciate
watching.
it.